Alright, today you are going to work on comparing and ordering fractions. Your objective is to compare and order fractions by rewriting them using common denominators. Common denominators would be, for example, if you had two fractions, then both of those fractions would have the same number in the denominator. Here's your vocabulary phrase. Least common denominator, or LCD. That is the smallest common multiple between the denominators of two or more fractions. It's exactly the same like LCM. The only thing that's different is there's a D in one and an M in the other. The D just stands for denominator, but you're still finding the lowest or least common multiple. Here are the steps for comparing fractions. Step number 1, find a common multiple between the denominators. Now, you can find the LCD or you can find just any common multiple. Either strategy will work. Next, you need to find equivalent fractions using the common multiple. And lastly, you need to compare the numerators. Once your fractions have the same denominator, all you need to do to compare them is look at the numerators. All right, let's practice comparing fractions using common denominators. Here's our first example. Compare 6/8 and 7/9 to see which is larger. All right, we need to start by finding a common multiple of 8 and 9. Why 8 and 9? Because they are our denominator. We want to be working in the same fractional pieces. Then it's very easy to compare. So let's list some multiples of 8 and 9. As you can see, I have done that for us already. I see one they have in common, and that is 72. Does that also happen to be the smallest one they have in common? It does. Do you remember what we would call the smallest multiple that the denominators have in common? The LCD. So we have found the LCD. Now we're going to use that to find equivalent fractions. Look at the diagram I have on the right here. That's illustrating finding equivalent fractions for each one of the fractions given. So an equivalent fraction to 6/8 would be 54/72. An equivalent fraction to 7/9 would be 56/72. The last thing we need to do is we need to compare the numerators. Since we are working in the same fractional pieces, we're working in 70 all we have to do is look at the numerators and compare. 54 is less than, that's kind of a big color, I'll use a smaller one here, is less than 56/72. Now a professional way to write it is to use the original fractions given. So 6/8 was equivalent to 54/72. That is less than 7/9. That is the final way you write your answer. Alright, here's your practice problem. Go ahead and pause the video here and solve this, and then come back and check your answer. Let's see how you did. We needed to start by finding a common multiple, or the LCD, the least common denominator, least common multiple, between 8 and 10. I see 40 as 1 and 80 as 1. Now, which one would be the smallest? 40. You can use that, or you could use 80. It doesn't matter. In my example here, I use 40. Let me just go ahead and erase that 5. All right, now let's find equivalent fractions. How am I going from 8 to 40? I'm multiplying by 5. So I need to multiply my numerator by 5. 5 times 5 is 25. 7/10, I want to find an equivalent fraction with 40 in the denominator. How do I go from 10 to 40? I multiply by 4. So I need to multiply my numerator by 4. 7 times 4 is 28. Now all I need to do is compare my numerators. So I'll write this all out. We have 25 40ths. Let's compare that with 28 40ths. All you have to do is look at the numerators because our denominators are the same. 25 is less than 28. How'd you do on this one? Whoa! Sorry about that, it just erased. Let's go to the next one. All right, we've compared proper fractions. Now let's compare mixed numbers. Remember, a mixed number is the sum of a whole number and a proper fraction. Here's our first example, 3 and 1/7. Let's compare that to 2 and 7/9. Now this one should be really easy to compare. Why? Well, if you look at your whole number part, 1 is 3 and 1 is 2. You clearly know that 3 is larger than 2. So 3 and 1/7 is greater than 2 and 7/9. The trickier part is when your mixed number, or the whole number part, excuse me, is the same. So here we go. When comparing mixed numbers with the same whole number part, follow the same exact step for comparing fractions. Make sure you write that down. So here's an example where we'll apply that. We need to compare 6 and 27/32 and 6 and 3/4. So we first need to start by finding a common denominator between 32 and 4. Can you think of one? Well, you should recognize that 32 is actually a multiple of 4, right? 4 times 8 is 32. So a common multiple, and actually the least common denominator or least common multiple of 32 and 4 is 32. So now we're going to use that to write equivalent fractions, and I have it all set up for us here. So let me just change my pen around. How am I going from 32 to 32? Well, I'm just multiplying by 1. So this I just can rewrite. The one we need to focus on is 3/4. I need to write an equivalent fraction with 32 in the denominator. So I'm going to multiply by 8 because 4 times 8 is 32. And I'm going to do the same with the numerator. Multiply by 8. 3 times 8 is 24. Now all we have to do, since we have the same fractional parts, we're working in 30 seconds, is compare the numerators. So I have 27/32, and I want to compare that with 24/32. Well, 27 is clearly larger than 24. Now, remember the professional way to write it is using the original fractions that they gave you. And in this case, it's mixed numbers, so don't forget to include the whole number. 27/32 goes with 6 and 27/32, so that one just stays exactly the same. And that is greater than 24/32 was an equivalent fraction to 3/4. And don't forget your whole number, so 6 and 3/4. That is our final answer. How'd you do on that one? All right, here's a practice one for you. Notice that the whole number part is the same, so you need to work on comparing the fractional parts. If 4 3/16 feet of lumber is needed, is a 4 1/4 foot piece long enough? Well, go ahead and compare those fractions. Pause the video here and come back and check your answer. All right, we need to start by finding a common denominator, or a common multiple between 16 and 4. Did you think of one right away? Well, if you recognize that 16 is a multiple of 4, then I bet you did. So actually, that is the least common denominator, or the smallest multiple that 16 and 4 share, and that is 16. So we're going to use that to write equivalent fractions. How do your equivalent fractions compare to mine? After you have your equivalent fractions, all you need to do is compare the numerators. So that's what I did down here. 3/16, that is less than 4/16 because 3 is less than 4. Remember to write your final answer using the original mixed numbers in the problem. How did you do on this one? If you didn't get something, pause it, figure out the part that you didn't get, or make sure you come with a question tomorrow. The last part of our notes today, 6th graders, is on ordering fractions and mixed numbers. Now we're going to combine them. The thing I like to say is, in order to order, you have to be able to compare. And you've already worked on comparing, so you know how to do this. I will break it down for us though. I'm going to start with an example and actually give you the steps right away as well. So we're going to order from least to greatest, 1 2/3, 2/5, 1 7/8, and 1/4. We need to start by comparing the fractional parts. So that's 2/5 and 1/4. The other ones are mixed numbers. So how do we compare them? Well, we need to find a common denominator between them. The one that comes to mind for me is 20. So I have this all set up. What I need to ask myself is, how do I go from 5 to 20? Well, I multiply by 4. So I need to do the same with my numerator. This should all ring a bell from the previous slides. 2 times 4 is 8. In this fraction, how do I go from 4 to 20? Well, I multiply by 5. So I need to multiply my numerator by 5. 1 times 5 is 5. Now it's very easy to compare, because all I need to do is look at the numerator. Why do I just look at the numerator now? Because my denominators are the same. My denominators in both equivalent fraction is 20. Well, 8 is clearly greater than 5, so 2/5 is actually greater than 1/4. All right, one part is done. Let's go on to step 2. We need to compare the mixed numbers now. Remember, if your mixed numbers have the same whole number part, just compare the fractions like we did earlier and like we did above in step 1. So I have it all set up for us right now. A common multiple 3 and 8 share is 24. So what I'm going to ask myself is, how do I go from 3 to 24? Well, I multiply by 8. So I'm going to do the same with my numerator. I'm going to multiply by 8. 2 times 8 is 16. All right, so an equivalent fraction to 2/3 is 16/24. Let's do the same over here with 7/8. How do I go from 8 to 24? Multiply by 3. Do the same with the numerator. Multiply that by 3. 7 times 3 is 21. Now we are working in the same fractional pieces, 24ths. So all you have to do is look at the numerators. 16 is less than 21. So that means 1 and 2/3 is less than 1 and 7/8. Awesome. Did you notice that I left out a mixed number up here? Did I? Oh no, excuse me. In this one I didn't, but in the next one I will. Oopsies, I gave you a heads up. The last thing we need to do is put them in order. So clearly, the proper fraction ones we're going to order first since we're going from least to greatest. So 1/4 is less than, excuse me, sorry about that, 2/5, which is less than 1 and 2/3, which is less than 1 and 7/8. There is our final, sorry about that. I keep clicking buttons. There is our final answer. How'd you do with this? Let's go back and kind of reflect on what we did. We first started by just looking at the proper fractions and comparing those, right? Because we know the proper fractions are going to be less than the mixed numbers. Then we went and we compared the mixed numbers. Since our mixed numbers had the same whole number part, we just compared the fractional pieces. And then we brought it all together. I'm now going to give you a practice problem. This is the one that I was giving you the hint on before. I'd like you to order these from least to greatest. Go ahead and pause the video here and then let's compare our answers. All right, 6th graders, let's see how you did. Your job was to order the following fractions and mixed numbers from least to greatest. So, step 1, look at just the proper fractions. We have 2 proper fractions, that's 3/8 and 1/3. Compare those. Well, we need to start by finding a common denominator. So I went with 24, so I found equivalent fractions with 24 in the denominator. An equivalent fraction to 1/3 is 8/24, and an equivalent fraction to 3/8 is 9/24. 8 is less than 9, so that means 1/3 is less than 3/8. And I wrote that right over here, so then at the final step I can just look at that. All right, so now I'm done comparing the proper fractions, and I went and I compared the mixed numbers. Notice that here, like I said before, I'm only comparing 2 sets of mixed numbers, and there are 3 up there. Why is that? Well, 2 and 5/6 and 2 and 4/5 have the same whole number part. 1 and 2/3, I know that's going to be less than any of the mixed numbers with 2 as the whole number, so I don't even have to worry about that one. With this, all you have to do is look at the fractional parts. So compare 5/6 and 4/5 in the mixed number. Start by finding a common denominator. I went with 30, and I converted 5/6 to 25/30, that's equivalent, and 4/5 to 24/30. Now, since they have the same denominator, all I have to do is look at the numerator. So 25 is greater than 24. So that means 2 and 4/5 is less than 2 and 5/6. And I put that right over there. All right, the last part is we have to put it all together. So 1/3 is going to be less than 3/8. You can see that at the top. Then I can't forget about this one, right? The 1 2/3. Then comparing the